This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your normal partners in crime, Greg Thompson and Aaron Quinn. Aaron, how we doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. I'm trying to not get overly excited here. 2-0 undefeated is a weird feeling to me, so I'm going to just try to pump my own brakes here. I tell other people to pump their brakes all the time. I'm going to try to take my own advice.
I like it. And tonight we are very excited to welcome the one and only Joe Goodberry of both Locked On Bengals, Athletic Cincinnati. Joe, how we doing?
We're doing pretty good. Personally, the team is not doing so hot, obviously 0-2, but
for any of the fans who aren't familiar, Joe is a perfect guest to have on this week because not only is he an expert, football across the board, very knowledgeable guest, expert in the Cincinnati Bengals, hosting both the Locked On Bengals podcast and writing for Athletic Cincinnati. The man lives in Niagara Falls, and he is a Western New York born and raised native and has the Bills around him at all times. So, Joe, it was great to be able to have someone like you on this week to be able to kind of give that kind of insight.
Well, thanks for having me. I mean, I'm excited to talk about this game. I feel like the Bengals and Bills have played a lot in this last, 15 years or so, even though they're supposed to be only, every 3 years, but they have had a lot of games. And, even when Buffalo was 5-1, you remember that Fitzpatrick? This had to be about, 8 years ago or so? A.J. Green was a rookie in 2011, so maybe that's when it was. Yeah, I know then Bengals knocked him off. But
I was at that Thad Lewis game. Did you attend that
right.
one?
I was there too, yeah. Yep, Thad Lewis. Yeah, Bengals won that also. That was a good game.
That was a good game, yeah. Yeah, no.
But before we jump into it real quick, we'll give a little pump for Cover One Buffalo. Make sure you're checking out what we have going on, cover1.net. Download the app, listen to the podcast, check out the video breakdowns for Eric. I got to pinch hit for Nate Geary yesterday, did a breakdown of the game that we had going on. So just check out what you have going on. Joe, what's a little bit of work that you have going on over in your side of the world?
Yeah, you can listen to the daily podcast, Locked On Bengals, also Athletic Cincinnati, where I do film analysis, player evaluation pieces once a week. So recently it's just, how they looked last week in all the different multiple looks on defense for the first time, which we'll probably talk about. And previous to that, if you went back even further, if you have a subscription, when they had 90 players on the roster, I wrote a little bit about every single player. So if you're unfamiliar with the Bengals roster, that would catch you up pretty quickly.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, we were talking a little bit here off air, and I've been following you for as long as I feel like I've been on Twitter. First time interacting with you, in a show or anything like that. So I do appreciate you taking time to come on. And like you said, this is probably a really cool week for you. I'm sure the majority of your friends are on our side of the fence here. Just like when I do Patriots stuff, I'm from New England originally, and all my friends are Patriots fans, and they're all bastards, to be honest. But one thing before we get into this week's matchup, and it'll kind of lead into some questions about the matchup. When I knew we had you coming on and this whole week leading up to it, I really wanted to talk to you about the coaching change this year, because as long as you've been covering the team, it must have been a Marvin Lewis team. You're not an old guy, so it's got to be all Marvin Lewis your whole career covering this team, which to us who follow and cover the Bills is a foreign concept. It's every 2 to 3 years we've got a new coach. So that excitement of new coaches is probably worn off for Bills fans. What right now for Bengals fans and the media is it like having a new regime come in, and what is the Zach Taylor regime like? He's a young guy. I didn't know really a lot about him when he got this job, but he's replacing one of the longest tenured coaches in my lifetime. So what is this like for you guys with this whole new turning over new leaf?
Yeah, it's brand new. I mean, obviously, you go 16 years with the same coach. I'm 32 years old, so when he was hired, I was a kid still, a teenager, and I've known nothing else than a Marvin Lewis-led Bengals team, and for all the good and bad. I mean, they had some success. They had their most success, really, since their late 80s, when they were in the playoffs, Super Bowl run, same time Buffalo kind of remembers their good times. But, and there was the dark ages there in the 90s, and Marvin Lewis brought them out of it. So we're all thankful for that. But you could see 0-7 in the playoffs, and you realize that everyone has their limits and their cap, and so it was time to go. It was probably too late to go, to be honest with you. They may have wasted some of the prime years of the core roster they have now that are getting a little bit older with A.J. Green, Andy Dalton, Geno Atkins. And if they had done it sooner, I think fans would have been on board with that too. But it was time. We wanted to go fresh, wanted to go young, wanted to go offensive side, because that seems to be where you'd like to go for if you're ever going to get a new quarterback, if you're ever going to have a envelope pushing offense. We wanted an offensive guy. So coming from the Rams offense, where he was the quarterback's coach and then the wide receiver coach before that, He was not the coordinator, so that was some concern because he only had a handful of play calling experience. A handful of games was with the Dolphins back when Bill Lazor was there and got fired. And interestingly enough, he replaced Bill Lazor in Cincinnati as the coordinator. So Zach Taylor comes in, all young guys on his staff from defensive and offensive coordinators. There's really one guy I think that's over 50 years old that he brought on in terms of coaches. He's just a defensive assistant, Mark Duffner. It's really young and exciting and cool. I mean, they're doing things like, if you've got some old listeners or watchers here, they're going to say, this sounds weird, but the Bengals and Zach Taylor are giving players phone breaks. Like, okay, and then between meetings, you guys get all your tweeting done now. You got 15 minutes and back at it. And that seems crazy, but at the same time, I guess that's kind of how you got to get to these 22-year-old players, right? These Joe Mixons that are young and going to be the franchise or the face of the franchise. So, so far, it's been up and down. After week one, we're excited, obviously. And, you go toe-to-toe with the Seahawks in their stadium, which is the biggest thing, right? Because that can be a tough place to play. And the Bengals dominate them. They should have beat them. They should have beaten them 20 times over. And sometimes you're not ready. Your first game, you see a lot of the end of the half where they go down, they score, and then the end of the game, they were a little too conservative. Didn't really put their foot down, didn't really go for the game, and they allowed the Seahawks to take it over at the end. So people were excited, and then you go and get completely demolished by the 49ers, and it sets you back completely. Like, maybe he's not the right guy. And I know that's a hard swing from one to the next, but I mean, it's truthful because you don't have a long leash. We went from the longest leash to Marvin Lewis to, these guys do get fired in 2 years, like you guys have seen in Buffalo.
Yeah, to that point, the kind of two extremes, because I'm trying to get an idea of what this team is, because like you said, we've played the Bengals a number of times, and really the roster hasn't changed that much. Obviously, right. The offensive line is doing a lot of shuffling right now with injuries and things like that, but the core players on this team are still the same guys that we saw the last few years every time we line up against you guys. So, but I'm trying to get a vibe in 2 weeks with a new coaching staff of what this team is, and it's pretty bipolar in the 2 weeks. I think it's probably somewhere in between. I don't think it's as bad as we saw against San Francisco, right. And I'm not sure that it's as good as we saw in Seattle. Do you get that same vibe, kind of overall, big view of this team? Are they somewhere in the middle? I kind of compared them to previous Bills teams where they're kind of always in the hunt, can beat really any good team. They have enough of those weapons. Is that really where they are right now?
Yeah, that was a good tweet by you earlier. I thought that nailed it because they do have talent. They do have people that if you looked at these two rosters and we tried to combine them, there'd be a lot of players you would take from the Bengals. And one team's 2-0, one team's 0-2. And John Ross can score anytime he touches the ball. Joe Mixon, not this year so far, but he has taken over games in his short career. Tyler Boyd is consistent, always catching it. Last week he was 10 for 10 in terms of receptions per target, 120 yards. I should have had a touchdown if it wasn't called back for a holding play. So, they have weapons. They have players. They have talent in the right positions. But I think they're lacking in the positions or the places you'd really like them. Offensive line, linebacker. If you can exploit those two right now, whether it's offense is the way they're running with these misdirections, horizontal plays, play actions, jet sweeps, you're going to move those linebackers. You're going to confuse them. You're going to slow them down. And the Bengals just got chewed up by the 49ers. Robust running game and all their misdirection. And then on the offensive side, you go against 49ers with they've got 6 first-round picks on that defensive line and pass rushers. They just tore through them. And the Bengals' offensive line is bad and a bottom 3 O-line in the league. So it's hard for these weapons to consistently make an impact and take over a game. They've only been flashes here and there. And score 20 points and then 17 points, you're not going to win many games like that. You got to get over the 20 mark. You got to get to 24, 28 points if you can, especially with a defense that last year was 32nd in the league. They fired Terrell Austin halfway through the year. Marvin Lewis took over those duties as the defense coordinator, and they brought back everyone. There is not one new starter on this defense from that terrible unit, and they just said, okay, go out there and do it again. And
let's run it back.
Right. We can roll that dice again and see what happens. And it got demolished last week, and no surprise, I guess, because it's the same unit.
Well, kind of going down that same vein, I know getting ready for this game here, have you had a chance to take a look at much of what the Bills have done the first 2 weeks, and where is that maybe from what you expected coming in to what we've seen so far?
Yeah, I watched the whole week one because the Bengals played at 4:30 that week, and then the last week here I've just seen clips and reviews, a lot of Cover One stuff on my timeline, so I've seen a lot of reviews that way. But I thought Buffalo would have a chance to be in the position they're in right now. Obviously, the Jets, Giants, not great teams. They're kind of maybe the Giants are a year behind where the Bills were last year, with a rookie quarterback. But the Jets were kind of probably viewing the season as much as the Bills were. If our young quarterback takes a step, we've got a chance to win 10 games or so. So it was right there was probably going to set the tone, Bills, Jets, to either one of their seasons. And we see what's happened with New York now, or the Jets, and they're probably out of it at this point. But Buffalo instead came out, spreading it out, weren't running the ball. What was it, the third or fourth drive? They actually handed it off to a running back. Josh Allen was the only one actually running the ball. And I thought they looked crisp and clean. If it wasn't for the fumbles, the interception bouncing off Cole Beasley's hand, things like that, I thought, man, Josh Allen, look at him. He's doing the routine stuff. And I'm like you guys pre-draft, Allen, super high ceiling, extremely low floor. And it was consistent in every game you watch where he'd make a throw, you'd go, Andy Dalton can't do that. That's from my perspective, right? I'm like, he can't do that, even in his dreams. And then you go and you say, well, he's not hitting the routine stuff routinely, right? And he's not hitting those easy throws, those checkdowns, or whatever the case may be. It was just too much ups and downs. And it's not even a full season. It was from play to play with him at times. So I was, and I change every time, but I was of the thought of guys who are who they are coming out of college for the most part. Your strengths are your strengths, your weaknesses are your weaknesses. The coaches will hammer them to what they end up being around year 3, year 4. And the other side, the opposing side, is going to try to exploit those weaknesses, right? And it's up to the coach to put them in the best position. So coming into this year, I'm interested to see what Allen can do. If he can be the more routine guy that can still hit the big, crazy plays that maybe only 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks can actually do in this league. And maybe not how many of them can actually do the combination of the running and throwing. It's Cam Newton MVP type season, and that's really it lately. So if you can get him to that point, and I don't know if he will be, but Buffalo expects to be 3-0 after this game. And if they are, that puts their chances of making the playoffs very good amongst the teams, that in the AFC. Look at it right now. What is it? The Ravens, the Patriots, I guess the Chiefs and the Chargers are probably the next team, but Buffalo's right there. There's no reason why Buffalo shouldn't take care of business this week, go on the rest of the year, and handle it. It's up to Josh Allen, though, because I do think they put enough pieces around him. They went out, signed offensive linemen, signed receivers, drafted a running back in the 3rd round. The defense is good, one of maybe the most underrated defense in the league. If you talk to people outside of Buffalo that really don't know, they'd probably be shocked that this defense is that good. I think Bengals fans will be surprised this week. But so it's a good team, but I think it's still going to come down to Allen.
Let's talk on that nerve a little bit about the Buffalo defense going up against the Cincinnati offense, because I think I agree with you that the pulse of the fan base feels, in my opinion, maybe a little too overconfident about this game and being 3-0. And I think the fans are kind of looking on to New England. Obviously, that's an easy thing for us because they've been the big boogeyman for us and just beating us down for 20 years now.
Right.
So I understand that for the fans. I don't think that the players are seeing it that way. I think when they watch Cincinnati, I'm not a pro at watching film like Eric is, but when I watched you guys, there's plenty that the Bengals have that this is not a game that the Bills can sleep on. And it's their home opener, and you get a little worried about maybe people get too jacked up. And the other concern for me right now is Cincinnati's desperate to get a win. And I hate playing against desperate teams early on, because if a team wants it more, they're going to get it. But I think where you'll win it is on the offense. Obviously, Greg always tells me you got to score points to win. It's news to me, but you do have to score points to win. I think you guys have plenty of weapons to really stress this defense of ours. We do have a good defense, but we haven't seen anything like that, your offense this year and the weapons you guys have. Can you tell us kind of from your view, how do you think Cincinnati's offense is going to attack the Bills' defense? And in that same vein, what can the Bills' defense do? Obviously, we talked about the problems at the offensive line for you guys. Bills haven't really dialed up a lot of pass rush yet this year. Is this going to be the week that they're going to be able to do it because of the problems? So kind of how you plan to attack us and what you see the Bills' defense doing to try to slow you guys down.
Yeah, so far what the Bengals have done and what I expected was a Ram-style offense. Now, what does that mean? It means a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of jet sweep stuff, a lot of crossing routes, a lot of play action to try and create deep throws when they're running the ball, and the Bengals haven't been able to. In fact, they abandoned the run versus Seattle. They just said, we can't do it. Let's just throw it 54 times that week, and it almost worked. But they want to be a wide zone team, and they want to get Mixon out there and let him pick his hole and let these linemen get out in space a little bit. And so far it hasn't worked. I mean, they're averaging just over 1 yard per carry as a team right now. So we're very shell-shocked in terms of if this can work. And it's a bad offensive line, but at the same time, there was a bad O-line last year, and they still Mixon ended up leading the AFC in rushing yards. So he can be potent when he's out there and hitting his strides. And I think they're close. There's been a few plays, few runs where it's just one guy making a mistake here or there, and that's how it is, right? And one guy breaks down, and all of a sudden you're getting 1 yard instead of 7. So I do think they're close. I think they feel like they want to stick with it until it breaks free in their favor. But at the same time, you can't run your head to a brick wall for all game and look up and you're down 14 points. And that's kind of what happened last week. All of a sudden they were down, and they're not an offense that can play from behind. And I say this because all they're getting right now are the chunk big plays, and that's it. There's nothing consistent about their passing game, even though Andy Dalton's second in the league in yards right now. He's got a 99.4 quarterback rating, 65% completions. He's statistically one of his best years, but he's not playing that well. There's a lot of third downs, a lot of red zone stuff that he's not hitting. There's a lot of throws that he doesn't feel comfortable hitting yet. There's a lot of stick throws in the Rams offense where he's got to put it between that safety and that linebacker. And I don't think Dalton likes to do that as much. So right now they're living off of John Ross and his 4.22 speed. And Ross was labeled a bust after 2 years. He didn't catch a pass his rookie year. Whatever reason was in Marvin Lewis's doghouse. Year 2, they really didn't use him as much as they should have. He still scored 7 touchdowns last year, which was a surprise and a welcome addition to the team, but 10 yards per catch. This year he's averaging over 22, and he looks like he's got that speed back to where he was at Washington, where if he gets the ball, it doesn't matter where he is on the field. He can outrun anyone you got out there. I mean, you look at the Bills' secondary, Tre'Davious White's probably their fastest guy. Everyone else is kind of, okay, they may run a 4 or 5 or so. I think John Ross is going to be the threat. Tyler Boyd's not a threat. In terms of speed, Tyler Eifert doesn't have the speed he used to have. But Boyd and Eifert are really good check down, possession, underneath guys that will kill you. I mean, death by 1,000 cuts, that's what these guys are going to do. And Eifert in the red zone has always been fantastic. He had a touchdown last week. If they get down there, they're going to throw him the ball and throw it up to him. But the other 2 receivers really are nobody right now. Damian Willis is an undrafted rookie playing in place of A.J. Green, who's going to miss this week also, maybe another week. If he was out there, imagine that A.J. Green, John Ross, and Tyler Boyd. You'd feel pretty good with Eifert, Mixon, and Gio. Anyone would take those weapons, I think. It could be really good. But Green's not out there. They've got an undrafted guy and a former 7th-rounder, second-year Auden Tate's getting some playing time out there also. He's a 6'5 guy, 230 pounds, so he can box you out and make some plays that way. But, again, he's kind of slow and doesn't really get separation. So the offense, I think, will try to create these big plays, try to get the play action, try and stay away from Tre'Davious White and maybe – hopefully, I think, the thing here is Buffalo likes to disguise their pre-snap look and then change into something else, and that's Andy Dalton's weakness. Throughout his 10 years, he is a very good pre-snap reading quarterback. If he sees it and you guys aren't going to move, he will chew you apart. That's how he has these 400-yard games. So a lot of people talk about like the Andy Dalton roller coaster. It'll be good one week, poor the next week, and I broke it down to common opponents versus uncommon opponents, because they had pretty much the same coaching staff throughout his whole tenure there. When he played teams they were familiar with, those teams were also familiar with the Bengals, he did worse. When he played teams they haven't played, usually NFC opponents that you haven't played or seen in 3 years, he tore them up consistently. And it's because they didn't know how to attack him and what to do. So if Buffalo's defense wants to go out there and show one defense and then rotate into another one, they're going to make Andy Dalton hold the ball. And because of it, that pass rush is going to get to him because he doesn't have that time right now behind this offensive line. Also, he leads the league right now in batted passes. Buffalo's defense leads the league in batting passes. I think that could be a factor.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to see that kind of dynamic where from a fantasy football standpoint, there's a lot of names that people recognize on the Bengals, and then you realize that you have to be able to protect and have the ugly, big uglies up front to be able to keep guys clean. So it'll be interesting to see where that goes. But let's kind of flip over to the other side of the ball. Take a look at the Buffalo offense against the Cincinnati defense. And I think it's interesting. This is the 3rd straight week that I've seen group with a really stout defensive line and maybe some high names up the middle, maybe not the household names coming off the edge, but still some talent coming off the edge, and then more of a threat that if we can get past that and really threaten some of the secondary pieces, there could be some opportunity there. Or like you said, we've had a ton of success with those mesh concepts, deep crossers, getting different pieces moving at the middle level and the linebacker level. They've had a lot of opportunity there. Obviously, putting John Brown against someone like that is asking a lot. What have you seen looking at what the Bengals you think are going to be able to do and potentially have some success, maybe with some of those guys up front versus where maybe the concern will come in and how you're going to have to scheme your way to protect yourselves on the defensive side?
Yeah, the Bengals kept it a secret for most of camp. It only started to leak out a few days before the season started. They're a 3-4 defense now, and they really didn't show it during any of the open media days. They didn't show it during any of preseason, and then week one, they're a 3-4 team. And I wonder if that set them back a little bit, because you can see sometimes some guys are a little still unsure of what they're doing. I mean, you probably wasted 15 practices trying to hide it from the media, right? And so when you watch them, and now the defense is, or the league is a nickel defense, so there's still 4 guys down and 2 linebackers and 6 DBs. So it's not crazy from that perspective, but when you, or 5 DBs, I'm sorry. When you look at them in their base defense, and if Buffalo's going to go out there and try and bring an extra tight end in the game or anything like that, I think that's where, and I saw this a couple of times in the week 1 versus the Jets, Buffalo will spread out in their 11 or 12 personnel. And I think you can get Preston. You guys know Preston Brown. You can get him out in space. Not actually where you want him, all right? We want him defending the run, if anything. He's even been poor there this year because he's just a step too slow. But that front defensive line for the Bengals is where they win and lose. And as a Bengals perspective, you really hope they win, because without it, in week 1 they won. They beat up Seattle's bad offensive line and really made it hard on Russell Wilson, and really only allowed really 1 deep catch. Besides that, they locked everyone down the whole game. And it starts with Geno Atkins at defensive tackle, perennial Pro Bowler, All-Pro. He might be the best case on the team for a Hall of Fame eventually. He's good, and he will wreck stuff. And if Buffalo's got any issue on the interior offensive line, Geno Atkins will take care of it, and for our perspective, a good way. On the edge, Carlos Dunlap and Sam Hubbard are the starters right now. Hubbard's in year 2 out of Ohio State, 3rd-round pick. Carlos Dunlap is one of the more underrated edge defenders in the league. He's really good against the run, long, athletic guy. You get lax with him, or if you've got a bad right tackle out there, or you try to put a tight end on him, he's going to take advantage of it. And he's one of the only few guys on the team that will make a clutch play when needed. Sam Hubbard, though, in year 2 has surprised us. He had a decent rookie year, but at the same time, he was suspected to have maybe a capped ceiling and maybe be near it coming out of college. But he looks faster, he looks quicker, he looks stronger. He had 2 sacks week 1, chasing down Russell Wilson for one of them. He's been really impressive. They think he's going to be a core player for them going forward. But their best edge rusher isn't those 2 guys. It's Carl Lawson. And it's his 3rd year. He's coming off an ACL injury. They get him out there basically in their nickel defense when it's obvious pass rushing situations. And he is a load to block. He is just barely 6'3", but 265. He's got power, can get around the corner. His technique, pass rush moves, that's who you want to watch for your young guy, looking at a guy with multiple moves and being crisp and clean in all of them. Carl Lawson is a threat. And then they have 3 basically nose tackles other than those guys that'll rotate in. And it's Andrew Billings in his 4th year, Ryan Glasgow out of Michigan, his 3rd year. And Josh Tupou is an underrated guy, but he's a big 350-pounder. They'll get in there to stuff the run. So it really starts with that D-line. They carried 11 guys in their initial 53-man roster because they didn't want to cut any of them because they felt like they were that good. At linebacker, it's Nick Vigil and Preston Brown. Both are terrible. Probably the worst unit in the league. Sorry, I'm going a little long here. Got to go through the whole roster. And they like all their talent at corner and safety. Also, it's just it hasn't meshed well. Their coordinator was brought over, defensive backs coach from the New York Giants, Lou Anarumo, and I'm not sure it's fitting with all these guys. Jesse Bates, who's year 2 out of Wake Forest, had a tremendous rookie year. And if you look at PFF's grades, he's rated number 60 out of 60 safeties right now. He's running wherever he wants to. They're blowing coverage. They're pointing fingers. They're not really sure who's supposed to take who when they're pattern matching. And I think when you're looking at it, you want to have some misdirection and confuse these guys a little bit. Maybe some receiver concepts or route concepts, combos that are going to play off each other and maybe confuse these guys, end up with a free open player. And both the 49ers scored 2 touchdowns with open guys. Seahawks scored 1. So, just blown coverages. So there's that chance for maybe John Brown to end up down the field by himself this weekend.
Now, teams have been attacking the Bills with the mindset, and the Jets even said it after watching the Packers do it to Trubisky and making him a passer and making him throw to win. We've seen teams try to do this to Josh Allen and not let him be a runner. Do you think that Cincinnati has this personnel? Because the things that I watch and what terrifies me, like you mentioned, is Lawson and Dunlop. I like our interior line. Obviously, we got rid of your friend, Russell Bodine, and we robbed the Patriots of a 6th-round pick for him. I don't know how he got a pick out of that, but we got rid of Bodine. We kind of shored up that interior, although Billings scares me a little bit. But the guys that are keeping me up this whole week are Lawson and Dunlop. And I don't love our tackles right now. But the thing that I see is they're not always the most they don't have the best gap integrity. They don't keep contained. They are very aggressive pass rushers, and they're super athletic guys. And they will create some holes for Josh Allen to step up and run if they get put out too far off the edge or anything like that. I think they'll cause some problems and get to Allen a few times in this game, but are you guys worried about some of the gap integrity stuff? Are they going to maybe dial it back a little bit to make sure he doesn't run? How do you think they're going to approach the athletic side of what Josh Allen brings to the table?
Yeah, I do think they're just going to let these guys go and rush because, I mean, if you've ever played defensive end and when listening, you don't want to be held back by worrying about the gap in the lanes, but you have to be worried about it. But at the same time, just let them go and let them try and beat these guys in front of them and try and create havoc. Even if you get the quarterback off his mark because he moves or leaves the pocket, you're affecting him and you're changing the play from there at that point anyway. So I think that's their philosophy. If we got to move them, fine, we'll move them, and that cuts the field in half at least. But Allen is such a threat. You let him do that too much, he's going to beat you. He's going to break one off. He's going to end up with 100 yards rushing by the end of the game, and you're going to wish you would have kept him in the pocket, made him throw from the pocket. But so I think they will. They are used to doing this with Big Ben in the past, where they're like, don't let him extend the play. He's going to kill you when he does because he's going to take shots downfield. Keep him in the pocket. And they've had decent success against them as much as you can for being the Bengals and Steelers. And they've kicked their butt for a long time. But I do think they'll try and let their guys rush, but they're going to have different blitz packages. They got a lot of zone blitzes going on right now. So they'll bring the rush and be aggressive with it by also dropping coverage on the other half. And maybe you can confuse Allen a couple times and get him to throw into it, or maybe hold the ball, bring it down and try and run in a situation that maybe he shouldn't.
I know we got just 2 more questions here before we'll get you out of here. So I'll ask you for a game prediction in a moment. But one question from the chat, one of our premium subscribers, Ron Beck, was wondering if you guys do end up taking the loss and the Bills go to 3-0 and the Bengals go to 0-3, is there a chance that we could stuff a draft pick in Zay Jones' bag and put him on your bus and get you to leave A.J. Green here?
Oh, A.J. Green, right. Man, it's tough. And we are having that debate internally amongst fans and stuff because giving a third contract to a receiver probably isn't the best choice. It doesn't happen too much. Larry Fitzgerald and Julio Jones basically are it, and they're still good, but you got to wonder if it's worth it. Like, has Fitz been worth it? They really haven't won anything because of it, paying him $15 million a year or so. So I think there is some question there. Green hasn't been able to stay healthy, but at the same time, if I put Green on the Bills, because there is a part of my heart that loves the Bills, and you got John Brown and Cole Beasley in the slot, with Josh Allen, that's how you complete a receiving core. And for a team that if they go 3-0 and they're expected to win 10 games or so, sounds pretty fun from there, if you're a Bills fan.
Yeah. I know. Before we ask you about the scoring stuff, while you were talking about that, I have one other thought that I want to get your opinion on because it's something I don't really know what to expect. We're seeing Tyler Kroft ramp up to possibly playing this week. I think even if he plays this week against the Bengals, I think it'll be a pretty limited snap count that we'll see out of him just because of that injury. But we didn't get to see him at all this summer. And obviously the Bills made him a priority in free agency, but they still addressed it in the draft. And we like Knox, and Lee Smith's got his offensive line role, although he had a catch last week. But he's got his – I know. What can fans – you saw Kroft all his career so far. Again, a guy that struggled with injuries and things like that. But what can Bills fans expect from Tyler Kroft when he returns, and can he be something that this offense needs and come into that tight end one role for us?
Yeah, Kroft had a weird arc to his Bengals career. He was brought in as he played some receiver, or I think he was recruited as a receiver to Rutgers. And you could see in that film, I remember watching him and really liking him in college. He had great burst upfield, and he didn't have the best catch radius or really ball tracking, but he could threaten defenses, and I think he opened up a lot in that offense. When the Bengals got him, he's a bigger guy. He's 6'5", 260, and they had Eifert, who was having a Pro Bowl year 2015, really all-pro type season. He was fantastic. And Croft became their Y tight end, their blocker. He was their inline guy while they flexed out Eifert. And Croft actually really embraced the role and became a decent blocker for about a year and a half. And then he dealt with injuries, in camps and in preseason. And you could see his development was starting to get capped a little bit. And then Eifert got hurt, and I believe it was 2 years ago at this point, and Croft stepped into that number one role and scored a lot of touchdowns. I want to say 7 now that I think about it, and unlimited catches. But he was a part of the offense that really needed someone to step up at tight end, and he was good. His hands were good. He ran good routes. I mean, we were very happy with Tyler Croft at the time. C.J. Uzomah was drafted the same year, the other tight end for the Bengals, and he was firmly behind Croft, but every year, so I would say Croft was like a 50, 60, 65, 70, if I'm trying to put a number on his development, where Uzomah was like 30, 40, 50, 70, 80. And by that last year, Uzomah just blew past him in terms of being a complete player, blocking, moving, running. I mean, he could do everything, where Croft was kind of like, he's firmly the number 3, and then all of a sudden they had to shut him down with injury for the entire season. He never got to reclaim that after Eifert went down, and I think they would have used him. They liked him. I think they would have kept him if they could have, but really Eifert needed a deal. Uzomah needed a deal. Croft, they chose a cheap one with Eifert, 1-year deal, and they extended Uzomah because he's been healthy and his development has not stopped going up. So that was really the decision between those 3.
Yeah, Uzomah was the guy I wanted all offseason. he just because he was, like you said, the healthy version of what, I don't think that talent-wise Croft and Uzomah are terribly different. Right. Maybe some strengths and weaknesses here or there, but overall, relatively similar players, except Uzomah stayed on the field. And I would have liked to have that. So before we get you out of here, give us a little bit more about where the fans can find you on Twitter, what to look for in your upcoming shows, and then we'll put you on the spot. Give us a prediction of the score you think we'll see on Sunday.
Yeah, find me on Twitter at Joe Goodberry, just like it sounds. That's the best place to reach me, see all the stuff I post or all the things I make and work. And sometimes it's not all football. Sometimes it's fun things also. And I always open to strike a conversation and talk about any team, or if you just got a question about a specific Bengals player or whatever's going on, I'm your guy for that. But prediction-wise, I do think this will be a close game. I don't think the 2-0, 0-2 is a big gap between them, even though the Bengals are coming off a terrible loss. They've played a 2-0 Seahawks team. They played a 2-0 49ers team. So they're going 3 games in a row here playing undefeated teams. And so maybe they look a little worse than they should. I'm going to go 27-21 in the favor of the Bills. And I'm going to say it's going to come down to a Josh Allen touchdown at the end to Cole Beasley over the middle as the linebacker can't cover him in zone coverage. It's going to go just like that.
No, we appreciate it, man. It's awesome to have you on here. Aaron and I are going to do a couple more of our goofy elements, but we appreciate it. Know you're a busy man, so thanks for fitting us in here and looking forward to having a good game. If nothing else, hope the Bengals see some better injury fortune going forward and get some of your players out there.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me. Take care. Good luck on Sunday.
You too.
So,
Greg,
Aaron,
how you doing, man?
Good. I mean, it's I'm a little flustered. Got me thinking about C.J. Uzomah, but it's interesting to hear a guy like Joe who has such an interesting perspective to walk around in Western New York every day and have friends and the radio and TV and all the different coverage elements that he's obviously very much in tune with what it's like to be a Bills fan and what the Bills have going on versus a lot of our folks. So I thought it was some pretty genuine feedback and that you heard him throw around some things like, hey, if you're thinking you're going to get 10 wins, and he didn't say that in a crazy way. He said it very matter-of-factly, like that was a possibility here, and I don't think it's crazy to think that. So I think
you predicted it, so you better double down on that.
But I think he did lay out exactly what you touched on, that this is not a 0-2 cream puff team. This is a talented team. Now they are missing some of that talent, and that this might be a little bit different if you saw the entire offensive line and AJ Green and everybody and Jaquez Denard and all those kind of players healthy. Maybe this is a little bit different, but I don't think it's something we can look past. And my one solace to that is I don't think McDermott, Dable, Frazier, are going to let people do that. I think that they're going to keep people focused and really avoid looking ahead for anything.
Yeah, no, I agree. One, I don't know if it's just an internal talking point or it's really just a sincere thing, is almost every player and a lot of the coaches have talked about the stress that McDermott puts on these guys in practice when it comes to situational football and practicing situations and preparation. Those kind of things all go in their silos and things like that. And I really think he's sincere. I know a lot of people just chalk it up as coach speak when they say, oh, this opponent, and then McDermott comes out and says, oh, they're a great team. And everyone's like, oh yeah, okay, sure they are. But when you go back and watch, maybe they aren't a great team, but they're good enough to beat the Buffalo Bills. They have enough players on that roster to go toe to toe with our roster. And I tweeted it out. Watching that team made me think of a lot of the teams, probably the majority of the teams throughout the drought, throughout the last 20 years of being a Buffalo Bills fan, where we know the talent is there to win enough games to be a playoff team. It's just they seem to not, either they get the injury bug or they can't put it together for a few games and they drop games that they shouldn't, like the San Francisco game. That's where it reminded me, like, oh my God, this looks like the Bills. They're dropping a game embarrassingly that they probably should have been more competitive in. And so I fear that the Bills, this is going to be a great test because we talk about it a lot. We talked about the last 2 weeks. This is a team we should beat if we want to be a real playoff contender and be in the conversation. We get so offended as a fan base that people say, well, the Patriots have already won the AFC East. Well, until we go out and prove that we're a really competitive, contending playoff team, people are going to continue to say that. And I feel like this is a really good game to show that because it's a good enough team to beat you coming home after 2 wins. Can you stay focused with New England hanging in the background and get the job done? And that's really the most important thing in the marathon of an NFL season is staying focused on the task at hand and beating the teams you should. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how they respond to a little bit of success, starting to get a little bit of hype. Can they continue on that and continue laying, like you kind of say, the bricks of positivity each week and a little bit of success each week? And I just want to see if that's what this team is, because then I'm going to get really excited if they can put away this team the way they should.
I think that's exactly what it is. This is that litmus test we need. This is a game we should win. This is a game that we are a more well-rounded roster. There are spots where the Bengals are better than we are, but we are a deeper roster. We are a healthier roster. We are a more well-rounded roster. I think we're a better coached team. We're at home. We have a big game, a rivalry game coming up after this. This is the ultimate litmus test. And if you need any further example, Ron said it in the chat here, go ask Seattle. Seattle thought that they were just going to smoke the Bengals and needed a lucky finish to be able to win that game. The Bengals almost beat them. I don't think we're demonstrably better, if better at all, than Seattle. So, they already showed that the Bengals can beat a really talented, capable team. So we cannot look past them. This is not playing the Dolphins. We'll joke about it when that time comes. You can look past the Dolphins. That's fine. They're the only team in the NFL that is like that. The NFL, everyone that's there is capable of winning any given Sunday. And that is exactly what this is. They have to show up. They have to execute. They have to have a good game plan. I think Joe touched on some of those things in that we need to be creative in having movement and eye candy that can trick some of their inexperienced secondary and linebackers who don't communicate well and don't have the quickness to make up for it in pure athleticism. So if we're able to do that, I do think our defense is going to be okay. I think that they have some threats. I don't think we're going to shut them out. I think that it's inevitable that at some point they're going to hit one of those bigger plays. And the key is maybe rallying to it, not letting it be a 70-yard touchdown, but just a 40-yard completion and then rallying to it to make a tackle, and not letting it be 4 and 5 of those monster plays, but only one big play. So I think those kind of things are going to really make a difference in pulling out what should be a reasonable victory here. So this is the ultimate litmus test because this is a game that we should win. We should hold ourselves to that standard. You should expect to win, but they can't just walk in there and expect the Bengals to lie down. They have to actually execute for 60 minutes to do it.
Yeah, and one thing that always scares me, I know people hate like sports cliches like momentum and things like that, but Cincinnati could very easily be a 1-1 team. We could very easily be a 1-1 team with the games we played. Even last week, as dominating at the end of the game, when you looked at the whole game and you're like, wow, the Bills pretty much dominated that game. We really let the Giants hang in that game. And there was probably a few plays. The one that comes to my mind all week right now is Sarah Neal saving that punt return for a touchdown. That ended up being a turnover. They didn't get any points out of it. If that turned into points, that game could be entirely different because we let that team hang around. The Bengals are better than both the teams we've played. And they're desperate to get a win. They have to get a win to even have any ideas of staying in right now this year. Right now, I thought the Browns were going to wipe that conference out of the water. Obviously, the Ravens are on top of that conference right now. Browns look a little to me. I mean, they did their job handling the Jets, but they don't look great. The Bengals are probably looking at their division saying, if we can get this thing turned around against Buffalo, man, we can really have a shot. You got the Steelers with a hurt QB. If the Browns kind of implode on themselves, we can actually get in here and fight for the same wild card spot as Buffalo. And this game could be one of those games where we look in December, and if you lose this game and it's a tiebreaker down the road with AFC teams, like that's another important layer to this game here is you got to beat the AFC teams. You got to beat the teams that are going to be competing with you for wild card spots. And that very well could be the Bengals. Even though they're 0-2 now, they could be a 8-9 win team when it's all said and done. And depending how this thing shakes out, that could be hurt us in the tiebreaker or hurt us in they're competing with us for that same spot. Because we're as good as we can be. You look at the Patriots, we're still competing for the wild card. We're not competing for the division until they prove that to me that they are. So there's a lot riding on this game, and not to overhype it or anything like that, but I think the players know that, and I think Sean McDermott is pounding that into these guys, that this is more important game than maybe the temperature that I'm gauging on Twitter. I feel like fans really just think we're going to be 3-0 going into New England, and that's just it.
Yeah, and like I said, there's a reasonable nature of why to expect that. I don't fault people for thinking that we're going to win. I just think that they think it's going to be much easier than what it is to get to that point. And I think you touched on it. It is a conference win. Conference wins is a tiebreaker getting into the playoffs. And whether that's directly head-to-head with Cincinnati or simply having a healthy conference win, that adds to what we're doing here. And we've touched on it before. My path to a victory is a little bit different this week. In both the Jets and the Giants, I wanted to see them pass early and then run late. I actually want to see a much more balanced approach this week. I want to see a lot of jet sweeps. I want to see a lot of counter action. I want to see them getting the linebackers confused, using our movement back and forth, then use that to get them moving with some run fakes into some play action movement, and then try to take some shots on them, get them with some of the tight ends leaking down the field after a play action. I think then we can do that, and then we can get back to it and lean on them in the second half. But I think that's going to be the path to victory here, is a little bit more balanced start, earlier running than what we've seen, a lot of movement, a lot of pre-snap motion, a lot of confusing eye candy, maybe some false keys with linemen pulling the wrong way and then countering back the other way, trying to get a lead, letting this defense pin their ears back against an offensive line that's really hurting, and then try to lean on them late and be able to try to pound the ball. And we saw that you can run on them with the action that San Francisco really pulled away at the end because of that. But I do think that that's the path that we can take here and potentially come out with a pretty significant victory.
Yeah, I do agree that I think there's a chance for the running game, and it stinks that Singletary is looking like he's probably not going to be a go for this week with that kind of happening. Because after our show the other night, I said I'd like to see him to get up to 10, and then as I was watching the Bengals, I was thinking in my mind, like, man, if he's healthy, I'd like to see him maybe get or up to 15 carries and see what he can do. He's not going to be there, but I think that opens up actually another interesting matchup for us with Yeldon and trying to get him out in space with Preston Brown. And if I was Dable, that's kind of one of the things I'd be attacking with, getting Yeldon, even if it's only 10, plays, 10, 12 plays where he's kind of involved in the play and really making Preston Brown chase him around, because I think that's a matchup that we can exploit. Did we determine, is Andre Roberts, he was limited today, correct?
Yes, but he was active and a participant in practice.
Yeah.
So I know Sal posted video of him fielding punts, and I'll say the burst that he showed coming out of catching that punt looked positive. I'll say that. Like, obviously that's not enough to make a determination. That looked like somebody who was real close and a genuine game time decision. And I'll say the same thing about Croft. I got to see maybe 3 or 4 routes against air, not one-on-one or team drills, but seeing him in and out of cuts, seeing him running for the ball, and he looked pretty clean, looked pretty solid. So I think you're right in the sense that I don't expect him to come in and have 70 snaps, but I do think that with how poor their linebackers and safeties are, I'd love to have Knox and Croft on the field at the same time and have them unsure if we're running or passing, and then do play action. We have Yeldon in the backfield, play action to Yeldon with, Allen rolling out, and all of a sudden you got safety or tight ends going down the field and Yeldon leaking out after the play action, and now you have all those weapons out there. I think you can do a lot of exciting things to be able to do that. So,
and even adding Roberts, kind of you talked about the jet sweep thing, and I know people liked what we saw out of McKenzie, and when he got the ball last week, he made some plays, but I really do think Andre Roberts, when healthy, and this is something that we can kind of talk about too, is I saw the injury list and a lot of it was questionable, and I'm urging fans to pump the brakes and not think of this as a win. But in the back of my mind, when I was looking at those injuries, I said, man, if they're close, I'd rather just sit them and wait for New England. So it's a little hypocritical of me to say we're all in on this game, but then at the same time say, well, we could sit these 4 guys and let them rest up for a week. But I think that speaks to the depth of the team, and that we're not talking about any world beaters here. It's not like John Brown's on the injury list and I want him to play no matter what. But if Andre Roberts is in, I do think that those plays that we saw go to McKenzie might go Andre Roberts' way, or he's going to get involved in some of that. And when you mentioned jet sweep, it made me think of, man, if Andre Roberts is healthy, what I saw from him in training camp got me really excited, because he can do the things Isaiah McKenzie can do, and he can do a little bit more. He actually was a receiving threat in camp this year. So I think he can provide something that we haven't seen in this offense yet, which is somebody opposite John Brown that can actually be a receiver and get downfield and play the middle of the field a little bit, because that's what we saw in training camp. So I think that can also, if he is playing, again, even if it's a limited amount, open up some of the things that this offense is going to be able to do and really stress those linebackers and safeties.
Yeah, no, I think that fans are going to be pleasantly excited about what that brings to the table from a, weapon on the offensive side, not just a special teams return guy. And that I think that's very similar. I don't know that Roberts is better on offense than what Isaiah McKenzie is, but I think he's equal to it, and he's better as a returner because he has much more sure hands and is much better at catching the ball with, not muffing the ball every other time, which is obviously, if anybody has any question, there's a reason Micah Hyde's back there and not Isaiah McKenzie, because if it was purely on your ability to return the ball, Isaiah McKenzie's better at that than Micah Hyde, but they can't trust that he's going to catch the ball. So that's where you get a huge upgrade from Andre Roberts. And I think Andre Roberts is equal to what Isaiah McKenzie does on the gadget plays, the jet sweeps, the bubble screens, things like that, and is probably a better downfield receiver route runner from that standpoint. So I think there's a solid combination where we're going to get a weapon that's in there, and just another piece of the offense and another piece of the puzzle from that standpoint with Roberts to see where that all comes together.
So we are taking a couple bets. We haven't gotten our full slate of bets because the props aren't out. So we just kind of threw some bets out there. If you haven't followed last week's show, Greg and I are doing some kind of friendly betting throughout the year here. It will be based off prop bets or just whatever us two idiots come up with that we want to bet on. We're betting in a range of 1 to 10 points. At the end of the week, obviously we'll tell you in the Sunday game who won. It'll mostly be based on these Bills games every week. And then at the end of the year, whoever has the most points is the winner, and the loser has to donate $100 to the winner's charity of their choosing. So it's fun. We're doing some charity work out of it, and I think it's going to be a fun thing to continue on. This week, what did we agree to? I got to go back through that. I closed the Slack channel. I know that we had you had one that you threw out there to me that was John Brown against yardage wise against I get all the Cincinnati receivers. Is that how we phrased it? That's how I read it.
You get any of the Cincinnati receivers, so it's not combined yardage.
No, but I get the whole slate.
Any offensive player on the Cincinnati Bengals.
Gotcha.
I bet John Brown has more receiving yards than any single
one. But I get the whole slate of them. I don't have to choose.
Mixon, Eifert, Ross, Boyd, if Andy Dalton goes on a quarterback reverse pass, I will give you any offensive player that John Brown has more receiving yards than any single Bengal. And we'll do it for 3 points.
I'll do it for 3 points. You got a deal. People that are listening to this, or when I put it on Twitter and see, I'm not going against the Bills, guys. It's we can win this bet. I can win this bet, and the Bills can still win this football game. I got a lot of flack last week for continuing to go against the Bills or whatever it said. So I'm going against the Bills again in this other bet. I bet you that I think Cincinnati scores first. 4 points straight up. I think the Bengals score first and kind of quiet down the home crowd a little bit and get them a little bit on the ropes early on in this game.
Well, and I do accept this bet. I take it. I will bet that the Bills score first, but obviously history is on your side because both games so far we've opened up letting the other team score first and score relatively quickly. So I am a little bit nervous about that piece of it, and that especially with the crazy adrenaline that can come into that, and do they get a little overhyped and maybe a little tight? What would make me nervous about this is I don't see some long sustained opening drive, but I do see the possibility of an early jittery turnover or an early jittery miscommunication getting beat for a big play. And that I think you heard Josh talk about that in his presser today, in that they're talking about that in the locker room, about how awesome it's going to be to hear Bills Mafia out there cheering and going crazy, and being able to go in and be pumped up and know that that's coming and not let it get over the top, not let it get to where you completely, blow all your energy right off the bat and then are exhausted halfway through the second quarter, and how to sustain, how to manage your emotions. And I think that's really mature that they're talking about that and going through that kind of mental exercise and training to get yourself ready for it. I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah, no, it's always a concern for me, and probably even more this year just because of the youth on this team. But it goes back to what we said about McDermott really hammering in situational things, preparation things. I think I agree with you. It is a mature sign to, hey, let's talk about this openly, because I think there is for anyone that's ever played sports, when you have that first big game of the year or whatever in front of your fans, you tend to press a little. You want to make a play. You want to get that crowd rocking. And the one I worry about, obviously, the most is Josh Allen. I think that there's so much pressure on him, and he's got the hero ball nature to him, the big play nature to him anyway. I think in the back of his mind, he wants to come out that first drive and do something fantastic to get that whole place rocking. And if you can dial that back throughout the week and just say, hey, we know this is going to amp you up, but you really have to play within yourself and play within the offense. The more you kind of talk about that and exercise those things in your mind, I think that come game day, it's there. And you don't want it to handicap them or put a governor on the players. You want the players to go out and play. But there's definitely the opportunity to kind of press things, or like you said, just wear yourself out quick because of the amount of energy and excitement in the building. And I've been there opening day, man, and it's like nothing else I've ever been to. So I can't imagine being a player down in there while 70,000 people are just going totally bonkers to start on a beautiful day. So I hope that I'm wrong on that bet, and that they don't allow Cincinnati to come out and score. I want right out of the gates for this crowd to just take over this game and really put it to the Bengals. So that comes to prediction time now. I'll let you go. Mine's going to be kind of lame because I think it already got predicted. So go ahead.
Yeah. I'm on a little bit of a hot streak. Last week I did call exactly a 14-point victory, and I had it 27-13, so I only missed by 1 point in each direction. I felt like I had a pretty good read on that game. I feel the same thing here, and I do think that the injuries are a lot for the Bengals. And I do think that the defense specifically is going to feed off of the crowd, especially in the second half when they're going to be a little bit tired. I think they're going to be on the field a fair amount because their offense isn't going to be able to keep the ball very much. So I think that our defense is going to wear on them, and their defense is going to be tired. So I think it could look a lot more competitive early than it ends up being at the end. And I actually think we're going to see something closer to 31-10.
Okay.
I do think that it's going to be within striking distance and a good game. And then all of a sudden, I think we see a defensive score, a big play, and maybe a run or two get broken late as we're milking the clock, and we see the Bengals defense wear down and give up some of those big plays like we've seen in the past. So I think this is something that could be a one-score game and be 16-10, 13-10 into the late third quarter, going into the fourth quarter, and then like 2 scores in the fourth quarter that have them pull away a little bit at the end. But I'm actually going to go a little bit of a stretch. I think we're going to see something close to like 31-10 Buffalo.
I hope you're right. I actually had the same exact prediction as Joe had as 27-21. And actually, I'll be fully honest, fully transparent throughout the day. It's going to be hard pressed, and a lot of people have called me homer throughout doing this for years, for me to pick against the Bills in these scenarios. But there's some flip-flopping going on in my head today, watching the Bengals, knowing what's on the line here. And again, maybe it's just being beat up mentally for the last 20 years and kind of growing to expect letdown, that I'm hoping that they don't do that and that they change the narrative of what this team is. But in my mind, there was a moment where I was considering coming on this show and picking a slight edge to the Bengals. But I'm going to go 27-21 Bills. I think this is going to be a dogfight a little bit. I think that the Bengals have that ability to make some big plays, which I agree with you. I don't think they're going to come out and beat us with 70-yard whatever, 12 play, 70-yard drives. I don't think that's going to be their path to success. But I think if they can make enough big plays and get into field goal range, or maybe get within the red zone and be able to score there, I think that they can really keep this game close enough. And I do think that they're going to be able to get to the quarterback a little bit, get to Allen, and like Joe said, bring some of that blitzes. They were confusing Russell Wilson, and I think that our offensive line is better than Seattle's offensive line. But if you're confusing Russell Wilson, I'm pretty guaranteed that there's going to be moments of confusion for Josh Allen. Russell Wilson's seen pretty much everything at this point in his career and played in some of the biggest games. So if you're throwing him for some loops and giving him some confusion, I feel like Josh Allen's probably going to have some moments where he's going to have some of those balls we don't want him to throw, and maybe some confusion and taking some sacks that we don't want him to take. So I think it's going to be a little bit closer game than maybe people are expecting. But I'm hoping your prediction is way closer than mine.
Well, and I mean, there's a lot of history in the NFL that shows the 0-2 teams against the 2-0 teams in the third week of the season is desperation time. And I'm going to say that one of those teams, we have that with the 0-2 Steelers against the 2-0 49ers, with technically the Jets and the Patriots. I'm not going to expect that one. The same idea with the Dolphins and the Cowboys, but the 0-2 Broncos against the 2-0 Packers and the 0-2 Bengals against the 2-0 Bills. I'll say confidently one of the Bengals, the Broncos, or the Steelers are going to win that game, and not all three of them are going to fall to 0-3. And I think that it's still a much closer league than most teams or most fans want to admit, and that there are going to be desperate teams not wanting to fall in that 0-3 hole, where if you fall to 0-3, you know your season's about done, and that you can still be competitive, but you're not going anywhere if you fall to 0-3. And I do think there's going to be a sense of desperation. I'm glad this game is at home. I would be more nervous if it was a road game in Cincinnati with the Patriots coming up afterwards. I do think that home crowd will help the defense, and that's going to be enough to protect from what may be a little bit of a amped up Josh Allen. But again, I think by the end, the defense is going to lean on them. This huge offensive line is going to lean on them, and that our running game is going to be able to help solidify that. And I think we see an impressive game, maybe from TJ Yeldon. Might be a surprise name that a lot of fans aren't familiar with, that may have a little bit better game than is expected.
Yeah, and I do want people to know too, like if this does go the other way, a game like this, and we've talked about it, and I just want to kind of pull back on that. I think we're maybe hyping up the game too much, that there's the playoff potential down the road, and you don't want to drop a game. We'd like to be 3-0 going to the Pats. Even if they were to drop this one, it really isn't the end of the world. There's still the path to 10-11 wins, so it's not like the season ends because you're 2-1 or probably going to be 2-2 after you play the Patriots, and then you're 500 4 weeks in. That's still a success for this team to be 500 after a quarter of the season's gone. Obviously, we want it to be 3-1 or 4-0, but there's other games up ahead. It really just means you got to win a game that you shouldn't. And the Bills historically always win a game that they probably shouldn't be in. So there's ways still to get there. So it's not the end of the world. You lose a game like this. They're still a good team. I just hope that they come out and take care of business. Like we've been saying, win the games you should, prove to me that you're a playoff contending team. And then I'll get really excited and start talking about, the prediction that I made of going 11-5. This game here will get me excited to really pound my chest and put that out there more.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. And that, sadly, there is going to be one of these games, whether it's the remaining Jets game, one of the Dolphins games, the Redskins, the Bengals, some of these other, genuinely winnable games from the Bills. We're probably going to stub our toe in one of them. And then there's probably going to be one of these games that a lot of
Cowboys
fans aren't expecting. The Cowboys, one of the Patriots games, one of the Ravens or the Steelers, maybe the Steelers a little bit easier now. That kind of game, we're going to win one of those too. So, losing on Sunday does not mean we can't get to 10 wins. But I still do think that this is a good litmus test of if we are now a more sustainable organization, if we are now the kind of team that's going to be on the upward trajectory and competing for playoff spots year in and year out, we win this game flat out.
Yep.
All right, man. Any other thoughts for the game? As I think that I really like your segment that you've come up with here for us having a good for the community and finding a good way to have some fun wagering on some things and donating some money. So we'll do, I think this will be a good format going forward. We'll do 2 on the show and then identify 2 on Twitter. So make sure you find us on Twitter. You can find me at Greg Thompsett, GregTompsett. Always having fun with Bills fans, going back and forth with what's going on and hopefully poking a couple good wagers here over Aaron's way to be able to find something here. So if you think of any that you think would be a good 50-50 borderline kind of decision that you think we'd have a hard time figuring out who would pick which side of, that's the kind of thing we're looking for here, where each of us will want to pick one side of it. So throw some of the others to us on Twitter and see if you can get one of the bets on the show. We'll shout you out.
Absolutely. And you can find me at Aaron Quinn 716 all over the Twitter machine. But on game day, you can't find me there. You can find me in the Cover One Premium Slack channel because that's my safe space. I'll tweet out a couple things during the game, but I will not be interacting on Twitter a whole lot during game day. This week's going to be tough for me. So I would like your thoughts and prayers and all those things because my wife is actually working all day Sunday. So I've got the 11th month, almost a year old, and the almost turning 4 years old here soon, all to myself in the house while I stress and pace and watch this game. It's going to be a nightmare at my house. So pray for me if you could send some positivity and thoughts that way. And at the end of the day, I really hope they win this game because I'm going to the Patriots game week 4, and it's going to be rocking for the home opener as always. But if they're 3-0 going up against the 3-0 Patriots, we might burn the whole place to the ground in week 4. So please, Buffalo Bills, do this for me because I think it might be the only game I'm going to this year. And I just want it to be a raging fall football. Like Sean McDermott said, it's really like nowhere else in the NFL. And I want to experience that in all of its glory.
No, I agree completely, and I'm looking forward to it. Thank you guys for hanging in there with us. Awesome chat tonight. If you had fun listening, tell a neighbor, tell a friend, tell someone on the street, tell someone you're in line at the grocery store. Let them know. If you see someone wearing Bills gear, ask them if they know about Cover One and let them know what we have going on here. Leave us a rating, leave us a review. We appreciate it. Thanks for listening to Cover One tonight. We are out.